I want to start here. I've been keeping up with this person. We cover them plenty of times on this channel. The Asian CNN doctor by the name of Leana Wen. You might know her. You've seen her butt face plenty of times social media. She was the one that really was saying the quiet parts out loud during the pandemic, talking about dangling carrots in front of people, basically telling you what it is that they wanted to do to folks that were, let's say, going against the grain. But she's been walking stuff back before. She said even that, well, let me say this. Why she's walking it back has nothing to do with science, something changing regarding the science that changes, right? It's fluid. That has nothing to do with it. They just, or definitely she, but because she flat out admitted it, this is more about how people look at public health. And the brand is damaged. So longer the charade keeps going, the more likely it is that they cannot implement these ideas again and get away with it. And that's what she explicitly stated. But we have something else that I wanted to cover regarding her walkbacks. So look at this on Twitter. She said, for those of you who don't agree that the vaccinated can return to pre-pandemic normal, you have to remember a lot of these people are based out of these like coastal areas, like in New York and like where they're still doing this shit. I know for us that in Texas, you're in Florida, you're in all these places that have been relatively normal for a while. There's still people in pockets of this country that are still doing this mask shit, still doing this social distancing shit, having vaccine mandates or passports of some sort. Like, it's insane. You have to remember that there's still people out there that are still doing this shit. She says, I asked, what should we all do? Perpetual masking, forever not dining out, avoiding large weddings and indoor gatherings. Virtually everything has risk and zero COVID is not a viable strategy. Now, this seems like a complete pivot from what it was that she was stating. Now, I'm not going to say that she was on the COVID zero thing, but she certainly was one of those that were advocating for these policies that got us in this mess. Again, she was the doctor that was trotted around mainstream media and was co-signing all of this sort of stuff. And yet now she seems to be kind of walking stuff back and really saying things like, this is something that you would hear us say, like, there's nothing that has zero risk. Nothing whatsoever. This whole if it saves one life thing never made any sense. It was illogical. It just was a stupid assessment of a strategy, if you will. There's some other things that it was, she said. We're going to cover that funny story here after this. But right here, someone that had a question, another doctor says, I have another question. If you found out you were that you were the unmasked person who gave COVID to someone who had a lung transplant, was look at this. This is the type of doctor that's still on this shit. And is this a medical doctor or is this, oh yes, OBGYN. So what the fuck? Vaccinated against COVID and they died, well, you have wished you had worn a mask. Like, they have to conjure up these people that still want this thing to go on, this crazy scenario or analogy. If you walked within 2 meters of a person and sneezed and that person had a double lung transplant and kidney problems, and then they fell on a blade of grass and that blade of grass was infected with like, what the fuck, man? Like, that's an insane scenario. First of all, it'd be impossible to find that out. How could you possibly prove that, let alone the science around the masking situation, which is questionable, for sure. We've covered that. But this idea that you could even nail that down, it was you, the person that was unmasked, that spread it to what'd she say? The lung transplant that was triple vaccinated. Like, damn, if the lung transplant was triple vaccinated and they died, like, I don't know, man. Maybe there's something up here. You know what I mean? Maybe stings aren't as effective as we initially thought. Leana Wen asks a question back. Says, what if it's the same scenario, but you gave COVID to someone at a restaurant you both were dining in? It will be awful tragic. Should you never dine out? Or what if you gave it to someone you met up with despite masking? Should you never socialize? It's almost like Leana Wen is starting to be, imagine shit getting so crazy. We're out of these two batshit doctors that are arguing with each other, she sounds like the rational one. You do understand that no matter what, none of these guys have answered any of the questions. Jennifer says, you do understand that if we all wear masks indoors, then fewer people will have. There's no receipts that show that. So then dining indoors might be a safer activity. There's no receipts that show that. None. They're just going off a hunch with that. They haven't been able to show that. We've seen the data from areas, and you compare those. Like, you have areas that have these mask mandates and requirements, and then you have areas that don't. When it came to the community spread, there was virtually no difference. Hell, in a lot of cases, it was worse where you had a lot of the mask mandates and stuff. Now, explain that to me. I ain't no scientist. Or in the case of I'm not a biologist. She said if we banned indoors and interacting with one another, cases would drop too. If we made speed limits 25 miles per hour, car fatalities. It's amazing how she's making so much sense now. The point is that we as a society have to decide what is appropriate for the government to mandate and what is individual choice. Well, I can tell you what the answer to that, Leanna Wynn. Nothing is the government appropriate for the government to mandate in this regard, and the whole entire shebang is individual choice. If you are so chicken shit or just scared of catching some shit, stay your ass inside. Right? This isn't a case of you getting me sick. No, this is a case of you going out there or me getting you sick. It's a case of you going out there and you assuming a risk. And every single thing it is that you do, man, I mean, I'm repeating myself in terms of what I said 2 fucking years ago. Where I stated, and I think I used the miles per hour thing as well regarding cars. Everything it is that you do, there's a risk assumed. You could die slipping down the stairs. Yeah, if you didn't have stairs in your house, you're less likely to die from stairs, right? Yet you wouldn't suggest that if it saves one life, we should ban stairs. And I hate to give you crackhead motherfuckers ideas, but damn. Everything you do assumes a risk. So the whole if it saves one life thing made no sense whatsoever, because that's how they were operating as if. Well, you go out, you might get something. Well, I could get someone sick before COVID. The vast amounts of bacteria and viruses that you guys spread every day, yes, could get someone else sick. You know, folks die of viral pneumonia every fucking year. It happens. It's not even a cure for it if it's not associated with influenza. Yet we didn't have such policies that meant you couldn't interact with people because you potentially might possibly get them sick. This is what happened. Okay, and Leanna Wynn is still a dipshit. I'm not giving her credit for anything. What's happened is that there's 2 things that I think people lose sight of when it comes to this subject matter. Number one, this became drawn on ideological and philosophical lines, particularly regarding politics. And what I mean by that is that people drew a line and they felt that masking versus not masking, vaccinations versus people that aren't vaccinated against this, it became political to the point to where these people thought that the folks that weren't wanting to do what they wanted them to do were folks that were, dare I say, opposite of them politically. They're political enemies. So they built policies that made it severely inconvenient and nearly impossible for them to operate in how they operated before, because they felt like they were punishing their political enemies. So these were people that they showed that they were not going to do what they wanted them to do, and they were going to use the state in order to do it, but there were still folks that were like, no. So they ramped up these policies in order to punish people who they thought were their political enemies. It had nothing to do with science. It had nothing to do with saving really lives, for that matter. The other point is that it was an easy virtue signal. You have to remember we live in the activism age, yet being in the first world, where a lot of these problems aren't problems. We're far removed from a lot of issues that plagued this country in America, for example, decades ago. We're far removed from this, but there's still this need for people to feel like they are going to be looked at in being on the quote right side of history. So all of these people feel as if they have to be presenting themselves as if they are the caring people who want to save everybody, right? So it was an easy virtue signal to slap on a piece of cloth on you and then brag about what jabs you got. So this is why you see so many people that take pictures of them in masks, took pictures of their vaccination cards, because it was an easy virtue signal that didn't really require anything of them, right? To go out there and actually change the world would require a lot of action. For these people, they think that they're changing the world for the better, for that matter, but it doesn't require much action. It's the same thing with other forms of activism that you've seen, where people change the Instagram post to a black box, or people go march or something. These are things that don't require much from them, but they feel like they are doing something and they're being virtuous here. Those two aspects that I just mentioned are why the charade, despite even the science that and the data that they provided, none of this made any sense, but they kept it going. That's why. And now you have people like Leana Wen walking it back, but it isn't because of science. It's because people are, even those that have been hard-headed for a while, you started to see people that were like, this is stupid. Why are we participating in this shit? Definitely when you saw examples. Remember, we were going to have the winter of death. Never happened. Texas and Florida was basically supposed to fall into the fucking ocean. And everybody was supposed to die because they had all these reopenings. Didn't happen. They were wrong virtually on everything it is that they had said regarding these policies and what they were supposed to do. And so people have, not everybody, there's still people that smoke crack that are out there, but a lot of people have seen the charade for what it is that were generally on their side. So when the next round of whatever comes out, they want the public health to still be looked at as a means of trust so they can implement this stuff again in the future. So that's why Leana Wen wants to walk it back, because she advocated for all these policies. She wants her institution to still be trusted. She wants people to still go to her for advice on this matter. And if she doesn't pivot, then people will see them for what they are. The longer that this goes on, the longer more people wake up to this bullshit. And she can't have that. Man, if anything has been shown over the last year, 2 years, is how compromised, shown you, a lot of us already knew this, showing you how compromised the medical community certainly is. You just listened to a clip from my podcast, For Canon's Sake, which is live throughout the week at 12 p.m. Central on youtube.com/YoungRipper59 and odyssey.com/@YoungRipper59. Be sure to check out my website, ericdjuly.com, so you can stay up to date with everything it is that I'm doing. You can also become a member and get access to a bunch of cool perks and exclusive content, which includes a social media hub where you can interact with myself and other members. It even has an app that you can get, which is now live in the Google and Apple stores.